Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Stephanie Cesca. Stephanie was born and raised in Toronto, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. She is a former newspaper editor in both Canada and Europe. She holds an English degree from Western University, a journalism degree from Toronto Metropolitan University, and a certificate of creative writing from the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. Her work has been shortlisted for the Penguin Random House Canada Student Award for Fiction and the Marina Nemat Award for Creative Writing, and Dotted Lines, which we're going to be talking about today, is her first novel. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
So I was going to ask you how you became a writer, but it looks like all your school is English and journalism, so you've done a lot of writing.
Yes, I have, but that kind of writing is very different from the writing that I'm doing now.
Okay, so why did you decide to write a book or go into fiction?
Well, I always loved storytelling, and I've always loved reading and books. As a young kid, I was in the library a lot. I was reading, those I don't know if you remember those
Nancy Drew
novels. Yeah, I was addicted. And my mom was like, stop buying so many. They're so expensive. But I kept reading and reading, and I just loved it. And it was something that I was passionate about and that I wanted to do. So I ended up pursuing a career in writing, but that was, along the lines of journalism and communications. But I did a lot of editing, and I love to write headlines, and I just love the craft of writing. But I would say my passion was more on the creative side, and that was something that I kind of did in the background. I didn't like to tell a lot of people that I was writing stories, but I would say that I never really got serious about it until I found the right story, and that was this story, Dotted Lines, which is now my debut novel. So that was about 2016. And once I felt really passionate about, the premise and the story, that's when I kind of, got very energized and put in more of an effort.
So tell us a little bit about Dotted Lines and what's the story about?
Sure. So Dotted Lines is about a young girl named Melanie Forsyth. Melanie is abandoned by her mother at a young age. And, this is obviously devastating. She doesn't know who her father is. So this is her sole parent. But Melanie ends up living with her mom's former boyfriend, Dave, and along with her half sister. So as you can imagine, this is a very strange dynamic. She has no biological parents in the picture. She has a half sister. She kind of feels like a third wheel in the family. She struggles with that sense of belonging. But despite that, her and Dave have a very strong bond and relationship, and they get along really well. And so this relationship positions Melanie, I think, well for adulthood. She grows up to be a very intelligent, successful person, but her life takes unexpected turns, and she suffers a series of blows as an adult. And that includes like a heartbreaking loss, a devastating betrayal. And I think the lessons that she learned through Dave is really what helps her navigate those choppy waters. And that lesson is that in family, it's not really about who gives you life, but who gives you love. And it's that message that carries her through and allows her to to come out of it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when I was looking at your book, and then I was also reading the New York Times, and they actually had an article about aging parents and aging step-parents and how people don't expect step-kids to take care of the step-parents because they're like,
Oh yeah.
well, you don't have a responsibility. Why are you doing that? So,
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the character of Dave, who's her dad, is that he's a step parent, but he's also a single step parent, right? So
yes.
that's like a really unusual and probably, very difficult role as well.
Now, what is the most controversial aspect in the message of your book?
I would say that blood isn't always thicker than water. I think is probably the most controversial aspect. This story explores the question of what does it mean to be family? What does family mean? And what does it mean to be a good parent, a good mother, a good father? So those are the questions that the book seeks to answer. And I think Melanie, through her life, she comes to redefine family through her experience with her, her mother, and also with Dave raising her.
Yeah, you dealt with a lot of different problems, like the family dysfunction and betrayal. Um, I hope it wasn't drawn on real life. I hope it was researched.
That's a really fair question, and it's actually a common assumption when people read the book. Like, even when I was workshopping it with other writers, they just assumed it was memoir or autobiographical. Of course, there are some aspects that I relied on my real life, including the places in which I grew up. But honestly, this is this is a book of fiction, and I sketched it out. And I kind of tackled the characters as I would a job. Like, I really thought about who they were as people, as individuals, their likes, their dislikes. I thought long and hard about who they were, and that was how I approached it, because they're invented, and so no, it's not a true story.
Okay. I mean, like Dave becomes a single parent, and I don't know, like, do you think it was hard to write about a man taking on a maternal role?
Was it hard? There are aspects that were challenging, of course, but I did draw inspiration from people I know. There are other families that I know that have similar dynamics, and I would say that I was inspired as well for my own challenges with parenthood. That was, I would say, the most, where I got most of the inspiration from. I'm a mother, and being a parent is probably the toughest job in the world, and there are so many ways it could be difficult. It could be difficult, even the decision to have a child can be a challenge. And then, no two stories are alike, and no two experiences raising children are alike. But really, that's, I dug deep with my own experiences and used that as inspiration as well.
What was the hardest part of writing? Like, did you find it hard to find time? I mean, it's hard juggling so many schedules in your households.
It's true. I would say it's probably the number one challenge for me, is finding the time. There's never enough. There's never enough time to write. I work full time. I have a family. I have a home. I'm passionate about writing. I consider it or treat it like a separate job. So I do try to make the commitment every day. There's a couple of ways I've managed to do this, because I'm in the process of finishing up the first draft of my second book right now. And to finish it, I've had to do a couple of things. The first thing I did was when I started writing this, I enrolled myself in a creative writing certificate program at the University of Toronto. And this was, I found it was just a really great way to keep me accountable and keep me producing. And the instructors there were great, and the classmates were good, and there is no motivator like embarrassment, in front of your class. So you really want to put your best foot forward and put something together that's worthy. So that was number one. The second thing I did was, actually, I didn't actually do this. This is something more that happened to me, but I'll just tell you the story. It was kind of, funny. I was like sitting, almost cliche. I was sitting in my local library, and I was staring at the blank screen. Like, I was there because I had the time to write, but I wasn't really feeling inspired. And I got an email from, a name that looked vaguely familiar. And I realized it was somebody from my class who was starting up a writing group. And they had invited me to join the group. And I was kind of, like, sure, I'll join. And, that was a number of years ago. And I'm still there. I'm actually meeting with them this week. We meet twice a month, and they're really, really talented writers. And they're also very strong editors, fantastic editing skills. So that's been really helpful to help me, get to the finish line, because without those strategies, like, life gets in the way, the dishwasher, the dog, there's always a reason, right, to do something else. But yeah, that's how I've made it happen. And sorry, there's just one other thing. The other thing I did, and I don't love this, but it's the truth. I just had to focus on one project at a time. So that means that, I would love to submit to more competitions or write some more standalone stories for my writing group, but I need to stay focused on track. So it's one thing at a time for me in order to get it done.
So what was the process like after you finished Dotted Lines? Like, did you start querying for agents? I guess that what happened, or?
I did. I had decided when I was in the program at the University of Toronto that I wanted to go the traditional route. I had put my pitch together. I had my manuscript. I was all eager, and I started pitching, and it was crickets, right? Like, like it wasn't even rejection.
Yeah.
Like it was nothing. And
Yeah, or a year later, suddenly it's like, oh, we looked at it.
yeah,
Sorry, not the right fit, and that's it.
yeah, not the right fit. And I will say, looking back, like at the time, I thought my manuscript was done and ready. Looking back, I think it wasn't. And I had this like little voice in my head, because when you're so far deep into a project, you don't really know, like you stop seeing clearly, right? But I had that little voice, and so I pitched for a couple of months, and then I was striking out. I wasn't even getting rejections. I was just getting the crickets. So I pressed pause, and I took some time away from my project, and then I came back to it. And then I thought, maybe this isn't right. It was the structure that I was struggling with a little bit. So, I worked with another developmental editor. I kind of like undid some of the changes that I had made, and I restructured the book. It took me a year to do that. So, but once I was done, I was feeling better about it. I thought the manuscript was better. I think I was also a bit more confident about it. But I felt like I couldn't go back and query those same agents with the same book. So what I did is I just started to pitch to publishers directly, and that's how I got the contract with Nemat Editions.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Okay. Now, let's see. Do you have any advice for people that are starting to write? Like what? Okay, you already said one book at a time. So one project at a time. So yeah.
And get a good writing group.
Okay. Okay. And are you working on another? Oh yeah, you're finishing up your second book now.
I'm finished. Yes,
Yeah.
I am. It's also a work of fiction. I would say it's also about relationships. It takes place in small town, southwestern Ontario, and it's about a decades-long friendship that endures many highs, many lows, and then kind of blows up spectacularly. So that's the second book.
Now, yeah, you're setting like you want to do in Ontario. Did you ever think about setting it in the US to pitch to Americans, or you want to focus on Canada?
Well, this is where I started out. It's not something I wouldn't have done, but I've always admired and the Canadian literary community, and it felt most natural to do that. The book takes place in suburban Toronto and also London, Ontario. So that's where it started out. But absolutely, I love the US market. It's bigger for sure.
Now, I know writers face a lot of rejection. How do you handle it after you get rejected?
Oh my gosh, you tell me. Isn't it? It's hard. JF, it's hard. Because you pour a lot of yourself into your project, and you work a long time on this. And I actually didn't tell anybody that I was writing a book for the longest time, outside of I told my husband, of course, he needed to know, but I didn't like to tell people. And so, it's hard, and you pitch to agents or publishers or whatever. And, sometimes, like I said, you don't even get a rejection. You just get the silence. And so you have to, you have to believe in your project, I think, and keep going and feel strongly about it and be passionate about it, I think.
Okay, cool. Stephanie, you're going to do a bit of a reading for us. Can you explain, give us a bit of context before you start reading?
Sure. So I'm just going to hold up the book here.
Ooh.
I'm going to be reading from right off the top, from the very beginning of the book. So this is the first chapter. It's titled Dave, the chapter. And so this is where Melanie meets Dave, who is her mother's boyfriend. And of course, this is a very important scene because this is the man that ends up raising Melanie for most of her life, although she doesn't know it at this time. So it's September 1983. A ray of green light hit the wall of my bedroom, numbers flashing together with the beat of the buzzer. 5:15 a.m., time to get up. I looked over at my mother beside me on the mattress. She was face down in the pillow. Her dark brown hair fell around her shoulders, long enough that it spilled onto the carpeted floor, which was different shades of beige depending on where the stains were. I leaned over to hit the off button and then gently nudged her. Mom, it's morning. She rolled around before answering. It's too early, she said, her voice muffled by the pillow. I elbowed her again, this time harder, and she rolled over so that her back was up against me. I hate mornings, she said. I don't want to go to work. It was Saturday, which meant her shift at Sunny's started at 6. The diner was owned not by a Sunny, but by an Eleanor, a woman in her 60s who wore green eyeliner and smelled like cigarettes. Her sunken eyes and wrinkled face carried a constant frown that scared the customers despite her attempts to smile. At least she tried. Mom slowly sat up, tucking her feet under her thighs in a cross-legged position on the mattress. She rolled her head up and down, then left, twisting herself so she finally faced me. Are you coming in today? I don't know, I said. Maybe. Don't stay home alone again, she said. Besides, I might need you for something. I sat up beside her on the mattress. I thought of the television set, whose dials were still broken, and the empty fridge. Okay, I said. We climbed out of bed and made breakfast. Coffee for Mom, milk and cereal for me, then brushed our teeth and got dressed. We left the house at 5:50 a.m., so we had to hurry to make it to the restaurant 4 blocks away. We're late again, Mom said as we jogged down the street. Elle's gonna kill me. She's been in a real pissy mood lately. As soon as we got there, Mom threw on her hairnet, tied up her apron, and showed me to my usual seat. Get your books out, she said. I'll bring you some juice as soon as I get a minute. Why do you have to wear that thing? I asked. The brown net looked like a shower cap she'd forgotten to take off before coming to work. It's beautiful, isn't it? Mom said, putting one hand behind her head as if she was posing for a photo. But Eleanor doesn't make the other waitresses wear that. Yeah, well, I guess Eleanor must really like me, she said before walking away. I reached into my knapsack and pulled out my fun for the morning, a box of broken crayons and a Care Bears coloring book Mom found at the doctor's office. I opened it up to a picture that hadn't already been scribbled on, a set of smiling bears playing on a floating cloud. I looked up after a couple of minutes and noticed there was already a customer in the restaurant, a man who was there every weekend. Because Mom had always referred to the regular customers by their orders instead of their names, I knew him as Hold the Bacon. He seemed quiet and even younger than my mom, but he had warm and friendly eyes, and though he didn't say much, he liked to smile a lot. Mom had never appeared to pay much attention to him, so I was surprised when, after the morning rush, I found them both standing over me at my table. Melanie, I want you to meet someone. This is Dave. I was busy working on a page with Love a Lot and Tenderheart, so I looked up only for a second. Mom, I said, can we leave now? Melanie, she said, me and Dave and you are going to be spending a bit more time together, sweetheart. We may even be staying over at his place for a while. I looked up and saw him standing there, a tall guy with light brown hair, wearing a jean jacket and a Blue Jays baseball cap. He kept smiling but didn't say anything. I started to color again. So, sweetie, would that be okay with you? I didn't care. I figured he'd be gone in a few weeks like the rest of Mom's boyfriends. Sure, I said. Dave knelt beside me so we were face to face. His eyes were clear and green, and he smelled like coffee and that pine tree smelling stuff men splash on their faces after they shave. Melanie, your mom tells me you're in grade 2. That makes you what, 6? Not 6, I said. 7. Oh, yes, that's right. She also tells me you really like dogs. I've got 2 of them at home. They're both puppies. I think you'll really like them. I like golden retrievers, I said, and Dalmatians. Well, I've got 2 border collies. They're baby brothers, actually. I think you guys will get along. Dave stood up as Eleanor approached, her heavily lined eyes noticing that Mom had taken off her hairnet. Abby, I need this table, so if you wouldn't mind, she said. And please, could you get those crayon marks out? Eleanor marched off as Mom's face went flush, a line of red that started at her neck and worked its way up. Come on, Mel, let's move over here, Mom said, her eyebrows squished together. I stood up as she wiped the table, rubbing the parts marked by green and pink crayon. Dave touched Mom's elbow to get her attention, but she kept her eyes lowered. I'm going to get going, but I'll come back to get you guys up at 2. Mom shook her head. Probably better if you meet back at my house, she said. I don't want to give Al another reason to be mad at me. Dave nodded and pecked Mom on the cheek. It was good meeting you, Melanie. Bye for now. He waved before leaving the restaurant with the newspaper tucked under his arm.
Well, thank you very much. That was a great scene. It's sort of like you don't know, like, the future. I mean, you just meet someone for the first time. So.
Right. Is he bad? Is he good?
Well, for a moment there, actually, after I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be a thriller. It's going to be one of those Gone Girl things where things go missing and everything else. Okay. But yeah, I think I've been watching too much true crime lately. But thank you very much for being on our show, Stephanie, and I wish you the best in your upcoming writing projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.